Burned. Severe burns. 4th degree, we assume.
The voice over the radio muttered. The truck engine rumbled, and gray plumes of smoke emerged from inside the exhaust pipe. I put my keys in my cup holder and grabbed my radio. The truck door opened with a deep click, and I slowly got out, slamming the door on my way out. Rain dribbled onto the front of the white truck, erupting in small bursts that left little drops on my face. The concrete was wet, creating a glossy and frothy effect along the road. A brick corridor separated me and the gloomy morgue I worked at for years on end. I walked to the back of the truck and fidgeted with the lock. How was the burn caused? I asked the man.
Faulty equipment inside the ship. At least, we assume. We haven't had any confirmation, but from what we assume, it had to have been a mechanical mishaps. We couldn't find or recover any other bodies. They must have been pulled out to space when the interior was punctured.
Is the information about the accident classified? I questioned him once again.
As for now, yes, government officials will notify us when necessary.
The metal doors swung open, and a terrible smell corrupted the fresh, misty air. It had the stench of rotten roadkill, searing in the sun. I cringed in horror, yet I had smelled the same thing a million times, and somehow I hadn't gotten used to it. I grabbed the cold metal stretcher and pulled it out of the truck. The tarp over the body fluttered in the wind, and it was as if the corpse was alive, grasping for another chance. I faced forward, right in front of the gray concrete ramp. I pushed the glass doors away from me and rolled the stretcher inside. The morgue was barren as usual. The small metal doors of the body refrigeration compartments opaquely reflected my workspace. I placed the charred body onto the silver autopsy table in front of me. I began to undo the tarp on the carcass. I reached into a small cardboard box beside the table and pulled out a latex glove and snapped it snug onto my hand. To begin the autopsy, I carefully chose a small surgical knife and began a small incision on his upper abdomen, where the burns and blisters were located. The epidermis was black and flaky, like a burnt steak left on the grill for hours on end. The skin seemed to sizzle in smoke the deeper I got into the corpse. My grip of the knife weakened. A burning sensation shot up the scalpel and onto my hand, nearly fusing the rubbery glove to my fingers. The blade flew out of my hands and I stumbled back, bumping into a small metal table and dropping my clean pewter-like tools.
Help!
I screamed in agony, writhing around, trying to take in the pain.
God damn it! Somebody please!
I cried once more. I looked for my phone, looking around desperately, but I realized I had left it in the truck. No one came to help. It's ironic. There were dozens of people around me, and they were dead. It was almost as if they were mocking me. Newly formed blisters appeared on my fingers, and they started to move around and bubble. I ran frantically to the sink, grasping my wrist. My hand, searing, managed to turn the faucet on, and a cold stream of water blanketed around my blistered appendage. My fingers flaked up, like the body I was operating. I turned the water off for about a minute to examine my hand, and it seemed like it was slowly spreading. As it spread up my hand, it started to burn my flesh, like reaching into an open flame. I grabbed the paper towel off of the roller and tore it off. I rinsed the towel in water, squeezed it out, and wiped my hand off, trying to remove it. My hand was just a bloody, irritated stump. My fingers were unrecognizable, as a thick coat of bullets covered them. They filled with a white-green pus, expanding and popping. I didn't know what to do next. I was trying to understand what was happening to my arm. Bloody paper towels littered the floor from the wound, and I scrambled to my feet, running to the glass doors. I pushed the doors, tripping down the stairs, each step sending a sharp pain in my side. I cried out, holding my wound as the rain pelted my horrific stump. The water was like molten lava to me. Each droplet burned into my arm, making the blood spurt onto the rough, most concrete in rhythmical fashion, spewing white pus all over. After minutes of little droplets of rain falling on my body, my nerves were so damaged I couldn't feel a thing. The bubbled blisters were dull, and the blood and pus made my head light. I thought about what to do next. If I could just get my phone out of the truck. I got up, determined to call 911 and get help. Adrenaline fled through my veins, and I managed to get up onto my feet and dart out of the front glass doors. I busted out, losing my footing, and tripped down the stairs, colliding with cold, solid concrete, busting my chin on the wet concrete. Rain pelted on my sizzling wounds as I tried to regain my breath. My legs were weak and bruised. When my bloody stump of a hand bashed with the gray cement, it split into 3 terrible segments of long crimson skin. I expected to pass out from the pain, but my nerves were completely gone from that limb. When I managed to tolerate all of this pain, I tried to get back on my feet, but I sensed something squirming in my arm. The terrible mess of a hand squelched and twisted. The 3 long skin chunks that remained on my left arm fused together and writhed. I felt it. I knew that something was inside of me. A living, moving, breathing thing. At this point, I gave up. Life just wasn't worth living. I knew screaming would do no good. I was excluded from most of society, and the fact that the area was gated didn't make it any better. As I accepted my hellish fate, I took one look inside of the morgue. I saw something shiny, glimmering in the fluorescent light, reflecting brightly into my eyes. It was my only choice. The scalpel, I thought to myself. It was the only way. I stumbled to my feet and crawled to the 4 brick steps that led to the comforting light of my workspace. I had assurance and confidence that I would survive. I fumbled up the steps. My vision was blurry, and I pushed forward on the black iron bars in front of the glossy doors. As soon as I entered, I fell to my knees, wiping the blood from both of my forearms on my shirt. I inched forward, crawling on my aching knees and elbows. I reached for the knife and grabbed it as tightly as I could. The metal was ice cold, but my body was stiff and hot. It felt like hundreds of pins pushed into me all at once. Anxiety swept over me. The pain was surprisingly timid, and I just kept scraping and scraping. Chunks of blood and flesh fell onto the tile floor. I carved deeper and deeper. My nerves were completely sizzled, making me unable to feel anything from the elbow down. As I was shredding my hand, I saw something moving from my elbow to my neck. I smirked as I moved the scalpel upward and stabbed it into my shoulder, where the moving bulge was. My nerves were still working there, and it sent a stinging sensation along my neck. Trickles of blood were sliding down my forearm, and I reached in to grab the creature inside of me. I pulled it out, with a terrible spurt of blood following. It was a nasty little fella. Its skin was brownish red and had human-like bulging eyes. The limbs on this abomination were twisted as it struggled to escape my grasp. My head felt light, and I struggled to breathe. The puddled blood on the tile floor had been growing by the second. I closed my eyes, and everything went dark. I woke up in a pool of my own blood. My clothes were crusted brown from my wounds, and my mouth had a disgusting metallic taste. I spat on the floor and looked around. The corpse that was previously on the table had vanished, and the disgusting little cretin from earlier had disappeared as well. The fluorescent lights flickered, and I took off my jacket to cover my wounds. I tied it around my neck to cover the massive gash over my shoulder. The only sounds were the buzzing from the flickering bulbs, and something that sounded like tapping on the floor. After all that happened, I would need something to defend myself with. I scanned the floor and saw the scarlet-soaked scalpel on the ground. I slowly leaned down and grabbed it. Blood touched the tips of my fingers as I fished the knife out of the red fish's liquid. I wiped the scalpel on my dirty gore-covered shirt and paced around the morgue very carefully. Every time the lights flickered, I felt as if something was near me, walking around the small corridors. Maybe it was messing with me. Maybe it was closer than I thought. I stumbled into a corner, where I stayed for what seemed like an eternity. I held the knife up, shaking and trembling. If I had lost any more blood, I would probably be dead right now. The adrenaline rushed through my body, and I was ready to attack at any second. I thought something would jump at me or pounce from the ceiling, but those expectations changed when I saw a slight silhouette in the dark hallway parallel from me. I blinked and tried to make out what it was. It looked bulky. It slowly shifted around, and every once in a while, it let out a quiet, wet snarl. I held my breath and tried not to draw any sudden attention to me. The thing made its way towards me. Each step let out a terrible, wet, sludgy echo that resonated in the morgue. Dread filled every inch of my body, and terror fled through my veins. As I focused on the thing, I had noticed something. It had an ashy, burnt upper body with a crippled torso and mutilated face. Its lower body was twisted and wet. What is this thing? What is it? It was the corpse. I was getting killed here. Ironic, huh? Dying in a morgue. I bet my friends would have a good laugh about that. I didn't think twice about fighting. At this point, the creature was at reaching distance. After all this fighting, I just wanted to close my eyes and sleep. I woke up with a terrible headache. Sirens pierced my ears, and blue and red lights flashed like thunder. I was in an ambulance. I could feel the rubble below me crunch beneath the speeding wheels. I was so tired. My memory was fuzzy at the time. I didn't know what was happening. The air mask surrounding my mouth filled my lungs with a slightly sweet-tasting gas. My limbs were numb, and I couldn't move. Bandages were wrapped around nearly all of my appendages. The ride was kind of soothing, and when I arrived at the hospital, I felt a huge relief of hope. A sort of safe space between me and that disgusting beast. I zoned out for a bit, but I could feel fresh sheets and blankets surrounding me, like a warm hug. Dozens of pill bottles littered my nightstand, and I was forced to chuck this despicable medicine every day. IVs were littered around my body in various places, and I was tucked into paper-like blankets. In some way, I felt dead. Like I was supposed to die. I should have died. Why am I still here? I have no purpose anymore. I wanted to get out of there and end everything already. As the days went on, I could notice my skin getting noticeably more dark and irritated. Dark veins shot through my body, and doctors came into my room regularly to check in on me. Every time they come in, they seem even more terrified than last time. I want to know what's going on, but every time I ask a doctor, they don't answer. All they do is stare hopelessly into my eyes and apologize to me. Why are they apologizing? I want to know what's going on. I don't have any answers. The only reason I released this story to the public is because I don't think I have a lot of time left. There's something squirming in my left arm. Like some sort of electricity. He doesn't have long to live. I can hear the doctors fuss and argue about me outside my room. What do we tell him? We don't know what's happening at this point, and things have been getting confusing, goddammit. I hear this bickering, along with the sound of groans and paper rustling. Just tell him the truth. We aren't paid to hide anything. The door creaked open, and white silver light fled my dark hospital room. The doctors had visibly concerned faces, and one of them even looked like they were on the verge of vomiting. I can't blame them though. If you saw how I looked, you'd be disgusted too. My skin was a pasty gray. My blue veins had been darkened, and my eyes were constantly bloodshot. My left arm hadn't fully recovered, but I could tell the meds and IVs had done something to placate my nerves. The squirming thing that had been in my left arm had moved. It had grown too, to about the size of a baseball. Every time I touched it, it would thrash, then slowly move up. I didn't tell the doctors about the creature in me, but I think they know about it from all the tests and x-rays they ran. The doctor in front finally built up enough courage and confronted me. I'm Dr. Adams. My associates next to me are Dr. Dominic and Dr. McDowell. The two men on the side slightly waved, then nervously stepped back. I looked at the three doctors and clenched my fist as tight as I could. Tell me, I said with a demanding tone. Dr. Adams flinched in surprise. How long do I have to live? He fiddled with a loose silver watch on his wrist and looked down nervously. We think weeks, maybe days, who knows? I weakened my clenched fist and exhaled. I laid my head gently on the coarse mattress. We'll run some more tests on you, but right now we need you to stay in this room. Dr. Adams cleared his throat and made his way to one of the two wooden chairs next to my bed. As he sat, he signaled for the two other doctors to exit, and he let out a deep breath. I'm gonna be clear. Things aren't looking good, he stated with a matter-of-fact tone. I hate to say it, but I think it'd be better if we stop giving you meds. I looked at him in terror. "You're dying, and there's no way to help you. I'm sorry." Well, damn it. I'm dead. In a matter of weeks, days, hours, who knows? "We'll be contacting your family immediately," the doctor said with a blank expression. "Oh, I don't have any," I replied with a similar empty expression. "They died a couple years back in a plane crash." The doctor inhaled deeply and itched the back of his neck. "I'm sorry." "It's okay. I'm used to them being gone." We stayed in silence for a good 10 seconds before he scratched his head and stood up. "Well, I'll get a nurse in here to run some tests tomorrow." I nodded and pulled my thin white blankets up to my shoulders. I woke up to thin, sleek layers of bright yellow light bleeding into the room. The light burned my eyes and forced me back into the covers. As I put the blankets over myself, I felt a huge bulge on my shoulder and rubbed it with my hand. A sigh escaped my mouth, and I looked at my wrist. My veins were pitch black, and my skin looked white and rubber-like. I put my arms back under the blankets and wondered what people would think of me. There was nothing I could do about it. I just laid my head down and drifted off to sleep. As I closed my eyes, I heard a door handle shake and my room door creak. I slowly pulled the covers down and looked up. It was a nurse. She was holding 3 long clear containers with needles inside of them. A long plasticky tube connected one of the needles to a large bag. "I'm Nurse Gonzalez. I'm just going to be running some blood tests for you," she said with a forced smile. I nodded my head slightly and lifted my right arm out of the blanket. The nurse looked at my pale skin, and I could tell she was disgusted. She plucked a plastic cap off of a needle and stuck it in my arm. She pulled the end of the syringe and blood filled the tube. I almost threw up just staring at it. Not because of the blood. It was the color. My blood was dark blue. Nurse Gonzalez's eyes widened as soon as she saw this. She dropped the syringe and ran out of the room. I heard faint screams and cries from the halls. Answers were the only thing I wanted. I didn't want to ask them about the thing in me, but at the same time, I would want to know what killed me. If they found out about the creature inside of me, they'd run some tests, but at least I would know what was inside of me, making me sick. Doctors and nurses rushed into my room with medical equipment, and the next thing I knew, I was loaded onto a stretcher and carried away. A familiar gas mask covered my mouth, and a sweet, tingling gas entered my mouth and filled my lungs. Cold metal is the first thing that touches my body when I wake up. I'm on a large operating table. There's tubes stuck inside dozens of places. Doctors are all around me, holding me down in place. I panic, flailing myself around. I didn't know where I was. I was in a large white room with a single metal door. Locks and keypads littered the left side of the door. Wherever I was, it was very high security. A single large fluorescent light hung overhead like a spotlight. I was the show, and the doctors were the audience. I had been drenched in sweat, and I could feel something painful in my shoulder. Shocks and electrical pulses overloaded my nerves. I tried to reach for my shoulder, but the doctors had put me in restraints. I tried thrashing around some more, but it was no use. Tears fled down my cheeks and my throat was raw and scratched. I take back what I said about being tested. I'd rather be dead right now. The pain was tremendous. The creature kept growing and growing. It seemed it was draining my body of nutrients. It made sense. My white pale skin, my black veins, the electricity that jolted through my body. It was growing inside of me, taking everything from me, my life included. I tried moving my head around to get a good look, but right then, I heard a strangely comforting voice. "It's okay." It was Dr. Adams. "We're not hurting you in any way. In fact, we're helping you." I could barely make his lab coat silhouette in the blinding white room. He had a slight smile on his face. There was something else though. Something that I didn't notice earlier. Everyone was wearing gas masks. Dr. Adams slowly walked to the front of the metal stretcher and stretched his latex gloves up to his elbow. He grabbed a scalpel from a silver reflective table next to me and cut into my shoulder. A nostalgic jolt of pain lit up my body as he cut into my left shoulder like butter, and chuckled as he pulled out the beast that had been living in my shoulder. It looked like that one abomination at the morgue, except grown. It seemed a lot bigger. Its bulging eyes were the size of golf balls. Its teeth were disturbingly human-like. Its arms were long and thin, as well as the legs. He was holding it extremely tight, and my shoulder felt like it was on fire. Dr. Adams looked at the specimen grudgingly through his black-tinted mask. He muttered, holding it close to his face, examining it. "Interesting." He signaled for a group of heavily suited doctors over. They grabbed the creature with extreme caution and swiftly placed it into a metal box. Dr. Adams then signaled a couple of other doctors over to me, and I could feel the white light of that room drift away. I was going somewhere, not back to my room. It was somewhere more secluded. A cell, a guarded cell. 4 men dressed in slick black armor stood in front. The number beside the cell read 004. I was taken off of my stretcher and thrown in. The walls were corroded metal. It smelled of rot. There was a janky lamp, an old wooden bed, a sink and a toilet. That's all. I was going to be stuck in this forever. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, shaking. Was I going to die here? Alone? In this very cell? No. I did know one thing. The alarms were ear-piercing. Red light pierced through the tiny metal slits on the door. Footsteps and gunfire echoed throughout the halls. The cell shook, and the doors unlocked. I ran out into the chaotic hall. The walls were concrete, and crimson light flooded the halls. Amidst the chaos, the guards were so wrapped up with whatever was going on that they didn't notice me. The escaped prisoner roaming the halls. I noticed guards running to the left and through a small doorway. I silently followed them and watched the massacre. It was complete calamity. The gleaming red hall mocked the blood-stained floors. Bodies were everywhere. Bullet shells scattered the floor. Whatever escaped is still in here with me. And I'm not going down without a fight.